Abbiamo un ospite un po' particolare, se posso definirla così. Ci è stato segnalato e molto volentieri lo abbiamo invitato perché è amico comune con un altro ospite che abbiamo avuto qui a bordo, che è Ersi Sotiropoulos, scrittrice, viaggiatrice e donna di grande fascino e esperienza, con cui avete condiviso, come ci stava dicendo poc'anzi, delle esperienze internazionali a livello di ambasciate, eccetera. Ma la cosa per cui forse siamo più interessati, che ci ha anticipato anche un pochino Ersi, è oltre alla sua esperienza internazionale in giro per il mondo, ma sempre dall'ottica di questo paese invece che ci sta aspettando adesso, la Grecia, è un pochino anche la sua sensibilità sui fenomeni politici, sulle cose che sono capitate a questo paese e ad altri a cui lei ha fatto da testimone. Quindi, signor Makris, come possiamo definirla innanzitutto?
Ersi?
No, lei.
Lei. In quale senso? How did the definition is very,
yeah.
It's always very relative.
Yes,
What
yes.
do you mean, how can you define me?
I mean,
When all is said and done, I am a rather boring civil servant. This is the dominant aspect of my personality, from school to the service, to the diplomatic service, and thus I fear I'll be a disappointment after an inspiring writer like my friend Ersi Sotiropoulos. At any rate, well, you can define me as a civil servant and...
ma anche un poeta.
Poeta no, assolutamente no. Sono alessandrino, Cavafis, e adoro la poesia di Cavafis, adoro Ungaretti, anche lui fu alessandrino, però io non sono un poeta storico, forse in un senso molto relativo, in un senso, però no.
Allora, dal suo punto di vista noi possiamo apprendere molte cose di questo paese, sia del passato recente e sia dell'attualità e forse anche del futuro. Le faccio una domanda molto così a bruciapelo, perché mi interessa una risposta non meditata. Come sta la Grecia oggi?
You know, well, what is the image of the country? A couple of years ago, 3-4 years ago, we had made news as the country which was threatening the euro to collapse, as the country which could be the beginning of the collapse of the European of the default. Well, now, but when all is said and done, that was nothing more. The crisis, what we describe as the crisis, was a crisis of our own making, up to a certain sense. If other countries had simply received the impact of the crisis 2008, well, the reasons of our malaise were rather more profound. It is that we had failed to modernize our economy. We had failed to adapt to the need to increase the productivity and the competitive mechanisms of our economy. So, in a certain sense, the crisis was also a blessing, because it caused this awakening and it imposed upon us to start reforming. Now, we have reformed up to a certain degree. Of course, the price was quite heavy. If you want the price in terms of quality of life for many, for the working classes, and even for the middle classes. But it was something without alternative. We had to go through that experience. And if we find the courage and the resilience and to continue, then I think the country will soon be, when I say soon, I do not really mean soon, but the country, what is soon, in a while, because you cannot expect the consequences of 40 years of mismanagement to evaporate in a matter of 3 or 4 or 5 years, because the country had experienced for over 4 decades, had experienced a sense of, not a sense, a real abundance, which which was beyond its reality, which was beyond the productivity. Thus, you cannot expect the results of that very long period of demented optimism to evaporate in a matter, as I said, of just a few years. It takes determination and resilience. I hope we'll find it.
It seems that you are not looking for any excuses in terms of the causes of the crisis.
No.
You're just talking about the responsibilities of the country and about the management
And
of
not,
the country.
well, the
Are they
invective
all
they are
in
heaping it. It's very fashionable nowadays to heap all sorts of invective on our political class. Not that they do not deserve it. They do very richly deserve all the accusations heaped upon them. But they were the image of their constituencies.
When you say they, you're talking about?
The politicians, the political class. It is the political class which was reflecting the image of the country. There were, politicians attempting to talk sense had always existed, but they were always failing to convince the public, the electorate, and the parties had to drop them. There were those who had preached the need to reform our welfare system 15 years ago, and their political career ended. Because the public, millions are coming out demonstrating against them. So in a certain sense, we have ended up having what we deserved. You cannot, the quality, the ethos of the politicians always reflect the ethos of the citizens.
Sometimes they are even better than the citizens.
Yes, I mean to say,
In general.
it's the mirror, and it's the reflection of a reality. Honest citizens do not elect corrupt politicians, and corrupt citizens cannot elect honest politicians, because they simply are incompatible.
Okay, but isn't that all the result of the heaviest attempt to be part of a European continent made in this way? I mean, isn't all that the tragical consequence of the
Perhaps the country wasn't prepared to join the European Union in the first place. Our habits, our working habits, our mentality perhaps were not very compatible with the rather more functional working traditions of northern countries. But
do you think
I think that what we have experienced here in Greece was that from one day to the next, we had to adapt to a reality which was not our own. That is, our administration could not cope with the standards
You're
of
very tough in this judge.
Yes.
Don't you think that the average should have been different in Europe? I mean, Europe is not the result of the northern country culture being leader in all the countries being part of the EU.
Let us not forget one thing, that at a given moment in the early 80s, the performance of Europe was totally different. There was an average which was a real average. It was a much more functional union. It was the very beginning, and we were all trying to adapt to the needs of being together. The introduction of the euro, perhaps, was not adapted to the needs of all, or to the capabilities of all.
One of the many,
exactly. Some of us joined the eurozone too early. I am all for a European currency, for a common European currency, but this requires mechanisms, governing mechanisms which did not exist, controls which did not exist, a central power which was not there. I don't know if we'll manage to develop such mechanisms, but I think, as far as Greece is concerned, that we did not really, and I shall not extend my judgment to other countries, but Greece was perhaps unprepared to join the eurozone. But now that we are there, it is unthinkable. We must do the utmost to remain there, because if we fail, it will be disastrous.
Okay, but being part of a coalition of countries and of a federation of countries, as you want to call it, as Europe is now, it's not only a problem of economy and finance and datas and facts and datas. Is it Europe a homeland, or just a place where different countries try to live together with the same coin? I mean, the same. Because homeland is another thing.
I don't know how politically correct is what I'm about to say, but because in our age of multiculturalism, but first and foremost, Europe must be a community sharing the same cultural roots, sharing the same traditions. It's sharing, exactly, and our roots are the Greco-Roman world, and that of Judaic tradition, Christian tradition. Secular as I am, I must admit to that, and that these are our common roots. And the European Union must rely on these, on the communality of our roots, on Western humanism, on Western liberalism. And when all is said and what else is the globalization than the consequence of technology, of Western technology? And what Western technology is, if not the fruit of European liberalism, of European humanism? Globalism, when you concentrate on it, is nothing but the beginning of the participation of the destitute billions of Asiatic working masses in the wealth and in the prosperity of our world, which is causing, of course, a price, which is causing pain on the working classes of Europe, who have enjoyed a prosperity possible only, which was possible only when they did not have equally performing competitors and much less demanding than they are.
It's supposed to be made
But-
in a different way to
Yes,
be
but
successful.
yes, but in the last analysis, we cannot expect everything to remain the same for as long as you have the millions and millions of Indian workers and of Pakistani workers and of Chinese workers sharing in the wealth of the planet. Things have
Things are changing.
things have changed.
But in following the line you're saying, Mediterranean seems to be a homeland with much more similar roots than Europe, but not a state. And Europe seems to be a state, but not a homeland. What do you
Mare
think about
Nostrum, we are in a certain sense the cradle of Europe, the cradle of the Western world, because it has been shaped, the Western world has been shaped on that period between the 5th and the 3rd century, and the 5th century BC and the 3rd century AD. It is Mediterranean, and our Mediterranean experiences have shaped the rest of Europe, and even the Renaissance started in the Mediterranean. Now, and what was an important thing had been made by Professor Makris at the round table, that the ramparts of Anglo-Saxon liberalism, at the ramparts of Anglo-Saxon free market democracy, at the universities of North America, of the United States, these ramparts of free market, of liberal economic thought, are also ramparts of classicism, are also ramparts of Europe, of Western humanism. If in our education system, and here perhaps I'm becoming politically, incorrect, but indeed classical education recedes everywhere. But it's not this the result, the consequence of globalization, but it's being imposed by the advocates of democratic culture, of simplified culture, of culture equal and accessible to all. The moment, in Greece for instance, the moment you raise the flag of ancient Greek and Latin at school, at the level of high schools, yes, immediately you are branded as an extreme rightist. So it is not the fault of free market policies, it is not the fault of globalization that we are leaving our cultural roots behind. Humanism is not being betrayed by market policies. Humanism is being abandoned by those who are looking forwards to a simplified, to affirmative action and to a simplified education which the state cannot afford to offer to all.
But don't you think that we were two followers in the process of the creation of Europe? I mean, the culture of the northern countries probably drove the process too much.
Yes, because it began there. It began there.
No,
It was the goal.
The first ideas were from Italy, from
yes,
France, not exactly.
it was
in North
France
Europe.
and Germany. The Franco-German locomotive was always there. And when we say the Franco-German locomotive, we meant the German locomotive. And well, really, I do not have all the answers. But
Do you think that a Europe driven by more mixed culture, not only financial, not only economical, but also humanistic and taking care of exactly all things in the Mediterranean and Northern
I
Europe,
anticipate your question, and my answer is absolutely yes, of course. But
do
then
you see any autocritical disposal by the opinion leaders and the political leaders of Europe? Is there
that,
any
unfortunately, our educational system, neither our electorates nor our politicians found the courage to confront the community of educators who, just like the community of students, want everything simplified and everything less taxing and demanding.
Yeah. This is a problem.
Each time a government attempted to proceed to a reform, well, they had to cope with the most violent, reaction you can imagine. Occupations of schools and interruptions of lessons for months and months and months and months, and well, and even the proposal of creating model schools. This is considered anathema to the average, to political correctness. The state must offer only what can be offered to all. Model schools are not a working hypothesis. But if model schools are not a working hypothesis, then by now it's not a working hypothesis to offer a really complete classical education to all high school children. So unless you embark on policies reminiscent of the Anglo-Saxon elitist system, well, you're nowhere. You're neither. I am thinking aloud. I do not have all the answers.
Yeah, the problem is that a failure can be, but the problem is when if you fail, you're not thinking about the causes of your failure, and you're not looking at the future, trying to be different from what you did in the past.
For instance,
nobody's shouting about that.
We
failed in Europe for some reason.
Thoughts are formulated and crystallized with words. You need words. You must be the linguistic instrument must be really at your disposal. Must be really efficient. But look at the average high school graduate. They are almost dyslexic. How will they be able to formulate, to crystallize their thoughts?
This is not a small problem, I think, looking at the future.
But I think that everything begins at school level. Everything must begin at school level. Everything must begin at school level. We must start giving our children. I have no children. I'm a bachelor. But we must do our very best. We must concentrate on the young generation of those on children, not even on adolescents, because they have already more or less crystallized their culture. But we must concentrate our effort on those who are on 10 and 11 and 12 years
That's
old.
true for the future, but let me get back once more on the point, because I think it's so important.
Which point?
The point of the no autocritic disposal from the opinion leader. We are living the criticism to Europe, to the nationalism, to the fascists, and to the small parties that want to, make some mess in the political nations.
Yes.
We are not occupying place of the criticism that we must have against, not against, toward the Europe, in facing a Europe that made something but failed in something.
Autocriticism.
And this is a very, very big responsibility.
As I said, I do not have all the answers. I'm thinking aloud. But autocriticism entails a determination to start changing. You do not resort to autocriticism unless you are really determined to change. And,
Sure.
and once you do it, you must, and if your autocriticism really is centered on real causes, then you must have the courage to leave your place to another generation of politicians, of leaders. Because after you have admitted that you have committed such grave errors in your navigation, then you must be ready to leave another captain, to leave another skipper, take the tiller in his hands. But also, this is, as I said, a double-edged weapon. Also the electorate must understand that they had been demanding and supporting the wrong policies, which were simply comforting, which are comfortable, but didn't have anything to do with their real needs.
But don't you think that the intellectuals should be the leaders of this autocritical disposal, talking about Europe? Don't you think that the intellectuals are not doing their job in criticizing, in understanding the new ways?
We must not generalize. Some of them do.
In Greece, for instance?
In Greece, unfortunately, it is very unfashionable to be both an intellectual and to find anything good to say on the existing established order. Thus, our intellectuals are those who want to maintain an influence, are advocating extreme policies which in the end do not strengthen their appeal to the public. So they are advocating a complete change of our society, a complete change of our system. They are not proposing practical solutions which can be of any avail in the immediate future. Well, I do not know how, but in other countries you can hear good sense from. But in Greece there is intellectualism is too much related to a complete change of everything.
Very interesting. You have said about the problem of the school, the educationals, that we didn't create a class of thoughts and people aging and working on Europe now. So this is the result of the educational and schools. But don't you think that we stopped the process in creating a new model of the Mediterranean society? That's why we became just followers for so long.
The Mediterranean society, on the other hand, we cannot have a Mediterranean society if we do not have the partnership of the African coast, on those on the African coast. And the African coast, they do have their own identity crisis, which is due to the realization already in the 90s that the socialist, revolutionary, nationalist model which they had adopted in the 50s, abandoning the evolutionary pattern which the Europeans, their European colonial masters, wanted them to follow, when they have realized that the long decades of of nationalist and socialist dictatorship, of pro-Soviet dictatorships there, had left them in a worse limbo than before. So we cannot really mention the cause of Mediterranean unity unless we have the partnership of our Arab African of our North African neighbors. And you see that this is becoming increasingly difficult. This is one of the goals of the European Union. This is the very goal, the very objective of the neighborhood policy of the European Union, which at this point isn't functioning very much. We aren't succeeding in convincing them. The Arab Spring, alas, is proving a great disappointment. So anyone who has lived in an Arab country knows that the spring is the very unpleasant season, because it is pre-announcing the hellish summer, and it's the season of desert winds, of sandstorms, and as I said, the beginning of a hellish summer.
Yeah, but so, remaining in the metaphor, the spring follows the winter times.
But the winter is exactly.
So you don't think that? What do you think about the Mediterranean citizenship as a feeling of the people, as a feeling of the media, of the intellectuals? Is there any citizenship that we can talk about?
I think that there is a spontaneous, which is not being rationalized, but a feeling. Italians, Greeks feel much closer to Italians and to Spaniards. And I think that in the diaspora they form groups in a certain sense. Well, this is, if the feeling is there, but without rationalizing. As they say, una faccia, una razza, sì. È un cliché. It's a simplification, but as I don't. But to go back to education, I am the vice president of the Hellenic Foundation for Culture, which is the equivalent of the Dante Alighieri, of the Goethe, and we have young people there helping us as volunteers, but educated young people. Many of them are postgraduate students. But when I start dictating text to them, I realize the gap. Exactly, in a matter of 30 years. They are in their, I am in my early 60s, they are in their early 30s. 30 years have made a world of difference in not only knowledge of words. They have not learned to express nuances. They are unable to render a more delicate shade in their texts, unless they have to waste a page, because the more synthetic your language is, and the more succinct, the more difficult it becomes.
Maybe 100 years ago, more or less, somebody started talking about European Union as we have it now. Some of them were Italian, some of them were Germans, and so on. What do you think about talking now about European, United States of Mediterranean that can be in 100 here? Is it an utopia?
It is a utopia. Yes, I'm a federalist.
As it was
I am a convinced federalist. Yes, I am looking forwards to having one day the United States of Europe, but not the United States of the Mediterranean, because the United States of the Mediterranean would become an increasingly exclusive zone. Would that be inclusive of our southern neighbors? Would that be inclusive of Libyans? Would that be inclusive of Egyptians? Would
29 countries, for instance. 29 with Jordania, also with Portugal.
We had attempted all the schemes of Euro-Mediterranean cooperation have collapsed due to Middle East difficulties.
But why Italy and Greece cannot be also at the same time the last in Europe and with a guide role in the Mediterranean?
What we could do, and what I had proposed as even when I was a member of even before my retirement, and even now I'm trying to promote this and the cultural. We had tried to launch this, and perhaps still the Italian. It's a very opportune that that Italy has the presidency of the European Union now. What the two countries could become the vanguards for a regeneration, for a revival, for a classical revival. This is a noble cause. Italy and Greece, the two classical nations, to become the vanguards of a classical revival, an all-encompassing classical revival, which would cover everything. That is, we could, even without limited means, we could begin to subsidize the universities of much richer countries to maintain their classical and expand their faculties of classical studies. We could somehow attempt to render classicism, and when I say classicism, I mean also the spiritual substance of the classic world, fashionable. Young people can be caught up by what is fashionable.
That's fascinating. You're talking about, you're wondering a kind of cultural revolution of the classical countries.
Not a
revolution.
Not exactly, not revolution. Yes, a revival. Let us say a revival, alla riscossa.
Alla riscossa. Yeah, you seem to be not so confident in the possibility to get in touch with North Africa and the Middle East in terms of doing things together.
For the time being, well, of course, this must and will and must remain a long-term goal, and but the immediate future is absolutely discouraging. The present
what is the main problem?
We may try. What we must do, what it's our duty to do, is to go on sustaining and encouraging their civil societies. We must not allow the people, those who feel like us in Egypt or in Lebanon or to feel abandoned, having to choose between extremes, between the Islamists and other sorts of violent revolutionaries. We must make them feel that Europe is there and that liberal democracy is still there, and that our sense of Mediterranean solidarity is still there. But on the other hand, how can you blame those in my fellow Greeks and your fellow Italians in Lampedusa or when they see the multitudes of migrants arriving and not moving from there. So, and migration is a crucial problem. It must be solved. Otherwise, we'll see the fascists dominating our policies.
That's a question I wanted to To part with you, what do you think about the neo-fascism in Greece and in Italy and some other countries as an old tendency coming up again?
No, well, it's important. It's enlightening to keep in mind that a substantial part of the fascist clientele now in Europe come from the extreme left, come from the working classes, and also in Germany, in the 30s and in Italy in the 20s. The working classes had, well, the movements, the fascist movement in both countries had not become, had not taken roots, had only taken roots because the working masses had sustained it. So when in the last analysis, people who feel threatened in their way of life will resort to extreme, especially if they do not have the mental, the cultural, the spiritual preparation to reject such criminal theory. I mean to say, to an educated, to a cultivated man, the very the blend, the ideological and the aesthetic blend of fascism will cause him or cause her an emetic reaction, but not to someone who simply feels threatened, as I said, in his until comfortable way of life, and does not have the cultural equivalent, the cultural equipment to reject fascism on aesthetic grounds, if you want, because first and foremost, what makes one oppose fascism is aesthetics. Because fascism nowadays isn't the intellectual fascism of Charles Maurras and that sort of thing of the beginning of the 20th century. It's vulgar, it's violent, it's criminal.
What do you think about the Alba Dorata? What's going on? The process will become, we'll get to the end.
Here we have again, to some, and this is very dangerous, to some it's only a way to manifest their reaction, their protest. They are irresponsible. They are irresponsible.
What are you talking about? Sorry?
Some
find
it a way to express without being convinced fascists and without meaning to go on voting. They find it a way to express, to manifest a way of protest. But it doesn't. This doesn't make. Doesn't change things. Their vote is added to the mass of ideologically convinced. Of the ideologically convinced. I think they will not dwindle. They may lose 2 or 3%, but they will remain, as everywhere in Europe, a substantial dimension of our politics nowadays.
Of the actual democracies.
Yes.
So somebody told us that Greece could be even in danger for an eventual civil war. Is that true in your opinion?
No, for heaven's sake, no. The civil war fought in the 40s allowed Greece to remain a free market democracy. No, the conditions are totally different.
No Cold War.
Cold War. We cannot cause a Cold War. Yes, a Cold
But
War.
it was a force aging.
Yes, and now as to whether or not we can foresee a Cold War in Europe, yes, because you have now a revanchist movement in Russia, and we cannot deny the right of fellow Europeans, like the Baltic states, like the Baltics, and or even the Ukrainians, to choose the geopolitical bloc to which they want to belong. I don't know, but anyway, what is possible is all over Europe is to have to see an increased wave of terrorism, of domestic terrorism, not imported territories. Yes,
Isn't that the introduction to civil war?
No, because these are shooting stars. I mean to say, it's endemic. It has appeared everywhere, and it may reappear. You see such flare-ups everywhere. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Mr. Makris, we know that you're busy and you have an appointment tonight, but the last question, you know Mediterranean is an expedition sailing for 5 years in 29 countries along 3 seas, and it's this homogeneous area, and we're looking for the possibility for a dialogue and for being together in different countries but in a common homeland. What do you think that Mediterranean can give us now? Can we find something very useful as a keyword for the future in the Mediterranean culture? Are we doing just, a crazy trip following an utopia?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's a very valuable reminder of our common roots, and such reminders are of immense value nowadays. And even utopias are even necessary, are useful if not necessary.
It's a very diplomatic answer.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely.
You don't believe in Mediterranean Union?
I could say that in Europe, by definition, Europe become a multi-speed union. Thus, the Mediterranean component, the Mediterranean dimension. Of course, it's a possibility. Of course, we can and must develop enhanced. The Mediterranean countries must develop enhanced cultural and commercial and all sorts of cooperation in all fields. But where I am skeptical. I don't think that can include the government too. I'm skeptical that this could include also our southern neighborhood for the time being.
So it can be a neighbor.
Yes, it can become a European, the affair of South European countries, of South Europeans. Yes, by all means, and Portugal can become an honorary member of that, even if they don't have coast in the Mediterranean. But wherever we have those common roots of classicism, of Latin and Greek culture, we must try to develop enhanced cooperation. And when all is said, again, do you see? It's that everything has. You can find in this space the roots of everything.
That's why we're trying.
Even of agnosticism, even of secularism, because our gods were so charming, frivolous, untrustworthy, so full of nasty tricks, that they were training mortals not to rely on them, on anything, but even to fight against them.
Sure.
And this has developed our sense, of our ancestors at least, their sense of self-dependence, of self-reliance. So you can find everything in our space. But how to develop that Mediterranean cultural identity, that Mediterranean identity, well, I think that the main axis is culture.
Thank you very much, Mrs. McLean.
Io la ringrazio,
torniamo a parlare
io
in
la
italiano.
ringrazio, sì, veramente io non avevo tutte le risposte, però, pensavo...
Non stiamo cercando risposte, stiamo cercando di capire quali sono le buone domande.
Sfortunatamente la realtà va decifrata, però io capisco è una piccola media classe, la classe che sta soffrendo.
Certo.
C'è un senso di giustizia sociale, c'è la riforma, l'austerità non è cieca come riguarda non è senza sensibilità sociale, però non è sempre facile convincere la gente che sta soffrendo che le sue sofferenze sono senza alternativa.
Qualcuno dice che se le misure così draconiane che sono state usate per la Grecia fossero state applicate in Italia o in Francia o in Spagna, ci sarebbe stato fiumi di sangue per le strade. Cioè che in qualche modo la sopportazione di queste tragiche misure da parte dei greci è stata esemplare, nonostante i disordini.
Però sì, però perché? Perché il popolo aveva, c'era la conoscenza della nostra colpa.
Okay, era
era consapevole delle nostre omissioni, perché ogni volta il discorso cominciò 15 anni fa.
Sì, ma però,
e ogni governo prometteva la riforma
fiscale,
la riforma moderata,
graduale.
graduale.
Però questo è il punto a cui ho cercato di girare intorno in più in un'occasione dell'intervista, cioè da un lato questa consapevolezza di aver sbagliato, che è un sintomo di grande anche onestà intellettuale, diciamo così, del paese, ma di fronte non c'è stata, ma neanche in Italia e in altri paesi, una azione critica verso le responsabilità di una Unione Europea che è stata fatta male, perché se da un lato è vero che i paesi hanno sbagliato, hanno votato politici sbagliati, che hanno preso scelte sbagliate e soprattutto nella pubblica amministrazione, ma è anche vero che questa Europa è stata creata in maniera artificiale e non è mai diventato un paese. I paesi meno ricchi sono in difficoltà nonostante diano un apporto sociale e culturale molto importante, questo è il punto.
Ma la struttura, penso che l'Italia, non parlo perché i nostri la base economica è differente, però penso che in Italia la struttura economica del paese poteva essere quella molto più razionale. L'estrema protezione del lavoro, per esempio, la priorità assoluta del governo Renzi, del governo attuale, poteva essere fatta anni e anni fa. E anche noi ascoltavamo consigli europei da 15 anni.
Certo.
Dovete,
ma questo non c'è
dovete poco a poco cambiare.
No, perché per questo non c'è dubbio che le responsabilità politiche della pubblica amministrazione sono state altissime, questo non c'è dubbio.
Però dovete una cosa, che la Grecia sta per ricevere l'aiuto o il prestito,
Sì.
il più importante prestito durante la storia
Sì,
dell'Unione
lo so.
Europea. Allora avevano bisogno di garanzie.
No, ma questo non c'è dubbio. Questo non c'è dubbio.
Il rischio europeo in Spagna o in Irlanda non può essere comparato.
Non c'è dubbio, però l'euro ha salvato la Germania dall'unificazione con la Germania dell'Est, questo non viene ricordato. E il peso che ha pagato la comunità della comune divisa dell'euro nell'unificazione dell'Europa dell'Est è un peso culturale innanzitutto, perché quell'unione non era un'unione, come dire, necessaria solo ed esclusivamente dal punto di vista economico, era un'unione fortemente simbolica politico ed
assolutamente, e la contribuzione
al pari della presenza della Grecia nell'Europa, però. È questo che non viene valutato, capisce? Cosa intendo dire?
Perché c'è sempre l'elemento, c'è sempre there is always the element of
The supremacy
the supremacy, exactly.
That is the
Il
problem.
peso economico di ciascuno è importante.
Naturalmente, però è anche vero che quando si è così rigorosi nel far rispettare le regole, occorre anche essere altrettanto rigorosi nell'ammettere il fallimento di un'idea, che è quella della costruzione dell'Europa sulle supremazie economiche. Perché quando ci mettiamo noi quattro e decidiamo di fare un giro in barca a vela, non è che io metto la barca, porto la barca e voi venite solo a bordo così, ci dividiamo i costi, no?
Sì, però non dobbiamo dimenticare che all'inizio c'erano soltanto i paesi ricchi, i 7 soci di Roma. Allora era una unione uguale. They were all after that they all knew the risks, they all knew the price they had to assume in order to join it, and then they all did their very best to join it, even falsifying the facts.
That's right.
Even falsifying the facts about their economy.
Yes.
So it's not the fault. It's not the fault of rich countries. You may answer, of course, but couldn't they see, having all the experts, all their experts around them? Couldn't they realize that we were falsifying all the facts concerning our economy? Couldn't they start ringing the bell to us when it was still time for us to start reforming or to stay away?
I don't want to force this opinion, but as some cynical observer says,
we were begging in 79 and 80 and 81. We were begging at Andreotti,
absolutely,
to not to raise his voice, to try to convince, and he did it.
Yes.
To try to convince the Germans that everything was fine with with the elements we were providing and with all the.
But on the other hand, the big capitalistic powers in Europe were buying the bond of your country, and now that they have to pay the risk, and I'm talking about Paribas and Deutsche Bank, they don't want to pay the risk. This is not right.
Absolutely, morally, it's not.
You have been gaining for decades about the price of the risks, and now that you have for one time paid the risk, but you don't want to pay it.
Then on the other hand,
this
the rules,
is not a union.
No, absolutely, but the rules were there. The rules were there. The rules were there since the very. This is the hard-headed and hard-hearted capitalist manner. There isn't, and then what else is there?
That's right.
You use your judgment. I repeat, we were not mature enough. Everything we had put up a tremendous effort to fulfill certain criteria to join the European Union and the common currency zone. But we knew, the government knew, that they could not sustain that effort for much longer if immediate results could not be obtained.
Sure.
So
Makes sense.
the moment they would say, let us wait for another year or for another couple of years,
Just to
then
see.
all the effort, no, let us go on developing, let's go on preparing, then the moment they would postpone the moment of, so to say, triumph, then everybody would
So you're not-
suddenly, it would have been an anticlimax, and everything would start deteriorating again.
So you're not convinced, as I am, that Europe now is just a bad contract,
No.
a business contract?